Hi everyone, I'm usually not recording opinion videos, maybe I should be doing more of them, but today I've decided to state something I have not seen a single other right-wing YouTuber stated before with regards to J.K. Rowling, and it's that maybe you should stop simping for her. I know, very controversial, albeit less controversial than my other videos, because you'll say, oh, she's been cancelled by the left because she says that biological men are men. Shouldn't we then support her against the woke mob? Well, not really, and here's why. Her opposition to transgenderism didn't develop out of her thinking that biological men are men and vice versa. Sure, it might be a small part of it, but if you read her tweets or even her manifesto, it becomes extremely clear what her main issue is: men being allowed to infiltrate the social category of women. Now, for the trad cons out there, that sounds perfectly reasonable because gender, they argue, should correspond strictly to sex and yada yada yada. And that's understandable and even somewhat courageous that she is reinforcing that message in such a terrible climate. However, let's see just how exactly she's reinforcing that message. In her manifesto, J.K. Rowling said that the so-called TERFs aren't even exclusionary to trans people because they include trans men. That is to say, men who were born biologically female. In other words, J.K. Rowling essentially says trans rights, but only to biological women. So she's essentially saying you can destroy the social category of men, I don't care, but as soon as you touch my social category of women, then it's personal. And she's not even that keen on being objective either, given she makes everyone gay or non-white in her book. Furthermore, on the wake of the unprovoked and unforgiven manslaughter of St. George by white supremacist police officers in Minneapolis, she even said that white people must change during the times of looting and burning by BIPOCs and Antifa. But let's just see how objective and totally not emotional she is regarding her trans stance. Or more like fuck men stance. I'll start quoting her recent tweets with her pinned one. Men defining what a woman is, what women should and shouldn't fear, what women should and shouldn't say, what rights women should be fine giving up, and of course, what constitutes real misogyny. In other words, what she is saying here is that if you're a man, you can't have any opinions about women, and while you conservatives defend her in her attacks against trans women, but not trans men, who she's fine with by the way, she literally says you can't even define what a woman is, and presumably you can't even have an opinion about abortion because that's a woman's right and not yours. Now, for those of you who have been subscribed to me for a long time know that I'm absolutely pro-choice, but even in this scenario, people with the same views as hers would tell me that I can't have an opinion about abortion because I happen to be a man, and in fact, multiple women have already told me that before. Here's another tweet where she responded to some dipshit leftoid without blurring out his name. Weird that a progressive movement attracted so many men who love fantasizing about the brutal deaths of women. And what do you think she's trying to say here? Don't get me wrong, such a behavior is never appropriate, but she's essentially singling out men in this tweet and alluding that the progressive movement shouldn't even attract these kinds of people. And it makes me wonder who these kinds of people are. Men like this? Men in general? Or is it people who are like this? Well, given her other tweets and almost a never-ending obsession with men saying and doing things she doesn't like, it makes me assume that she has problems with men being in her so-called progressive movement. Also, I call them so-called progressives because they are not actually progressives. Their ideology deteriorates society and it makes it less competitive and efficient over time. And to know more about this, I suggest you to watch my other video where I outline what actual progressive ideology entails, and I'm definitely not saying that men should join leftist movements. Quite to the contrary, if you're a male, if you're white, or if you're straight, please don't join any movements that do not welcome you and want to get rid of you. Being a leftist is against your own self-interests, and they don't even pretend to like you either. But yes, she is still absolutely a radical feminist and a leftist. She hasn't renounced her ideology, she hasn't left the left, She still believes in everything she believed 5 years ago, she just happens to disagree with men being awarded the female victimhood status. Which, I mean, the leftists don't entirely disagree on themselves. Her whole entire critique from the left was that she was being transphobic. It wasn't that she was misandrist or not inclusive to men. They surely didn't complain about her bigoted statements with regards to men. The fact that she received such an praise on our side without even agreeing with the slightest portion of what we stand for is honestly troubling. Why saying that trans women are men is considered to be the main criteria for being based, especially knowing her motivation behind this, which is clearly reads as, "Man, you don't deserve to enjoy female privilege and status." I don't know if it can be said any clearer. In her own manifesto, she says, when gender confirmation certifications are granted without any need for surgery or hormones, you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. In other words, she thinks of women as an exclusionary status symbol that should be kept only for women, because fuck men. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that men should become women. I even have banned a guy on my Telegram advocating precisely for it, who has now gone viral, by the way, for suggesting doing the so-called trans-maxing. I'm simply saying that J.K. Rowling doesn't like men, and women have social and institutional privileges in our society that they want to keep to themselves, and ideally we should work against that, unless we get to keep our privileges as men or even receive actual equal institutional or social treatment as women. So far, it's been just the reverse. If you look at the articles made about different gender gaps, the gender gaps where women lag behind were 20,000 times more prevalent than the gender gaps in lifespan, mortality, jail time, and others where men usually lag behind women. People just don't care about men, and feminists in particular, and when these people get into power, you get a government like here in Canada, where about a third of all victims of family violence are men, yet the Canadian government doesn't spend $100 million on men's shelters while spending $200 million on women's. No, they spend all $300 million on women and not a single penny on men. And this situation is basically the same across all countries, and I'm sure J.K. Rowling would like to keep the things this way as a committed feminist that she is. In fact, she is such a strong feminist that in her manifesto, among other things, she has personal problems with transgenderism because of a large increase of transgender behavior among biological females, although 100% of her attacks are directed against biological males. And I also did know J.K. Rowling identifies as a woman so strongly that one woman choosing to identify as a man is sending her to rage, as almost if she is part of a female hive mind, so she perceives to be under attack herself. She also advocates for female-only spaces because she thinks that men are simply too dangerous to be around women. Well, do you see J.K. Rowling advocating for safe spaces for non-black women to guard themselves against black women because they are apparently more violent than white men? No, and in fact, she made Hermione black in her Harry Potter series, so she doesn't have any problems with black women because they are women after all. They get to be a part of this exclusionary luxurious group that men don't get to be a part of, yet many conservatives still have the nerve to defend her while missing her target of hate, just like the leftists who think it's directed to trans people as opposed to men because they are themselves totally desensitized towards seeing any male issues. And here's the ultimate question: what should we do about it as right-wingers? Absolutely nothing. Because when Alex Jones was fined for about a quarter of the sum that the US gives to Israel every single year for believing in arguably dumb conspiracy theories about Sandy Hook, but also apologizing for it sincerely, what did she do? Did she stand up for free speech? Did she maybe think that the punishment was a bit too harsh? No, she cheered for it and hoped that it would break him. She literally said that. and that's Alex Jones. So I wonder what she thinks about people like me, or even people like you. She clearly still wants to destroy our livelihoods, yet many of us are so deluded into thinking that she is our ally, when in fact she literally could not make her position any clearer. J.K. Rowling hates right-wingers, and she also hates men, and likely because she is one in 6 women who were sexually assaulted at least once in their lifetime category, so it's a bit personal. So again, what's the ideal position here? The left should continue eating itself and being intolerant, so that a message that the left is bad and intolerant is spread to everyone else. The way they treat each other only speaks of how pathological their ideology is, and I like seeing that being exposed. When Joseph Stalin killed off the other leftists who weren't as orthodox and committed to him, but nonetheless have participated in terror, disenfranchisement, and repression of non-leftists in the past, you could say karma had arrived, so their continued infighting is only welcomed until she either renounces her belief system and apologizes for promoting bigotry, in which we can finally back her up after she has been de-radicalized, or she fades into obscurity, which is good aside from karmic reasons, also because the left will get a little dumber and more intolerant as a result, and that will send a message to the above 110 IQ crowd of who to side with next time. And arguably it is already happening, as a lot of people got red-pilled by the way the left has treated her. Finally, I just want to say that this whole transgenderism thing is largely a non-issue. It's a generational thing that is on the decline as we speak. Sure, about 5% of our current demographic might be infertile in the future, but it also means that they won't get to pass on their genes, and this type of behavior won't get to reproduce, unlike of course the irreversible damage that is caused by dysgenics and immigration, which will not go away. Yet you can barely get any conservative commentator focusing their attention on it. Instead, unfortunately, their mind is preoccupied with shitting on Zelensky, obsessing over the World Economic Forum, and thinking that the evil globalists would like you to eat the bugs and get tripled up on the gigavax. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to support me on Subscribestar or PayPal, as I'm banned on Patreon.